Would you look at that, I went to sleep and this is what I wake up to? The trailer opens up showing us how our protagonist enters Rubicon by dropping in from orbit, very reminiscent of the AC2 intro movie. We also shown some story details, like the fact that we're working for a Hunter Walter. Further details about our protagonist include that we are an older generation of enhanced humans, and as a result we're mostly silent and have no emotions. It's basically flavor text to explain why our protagonist is silent. This story detail reminds me of one of the characters from Tower City Blade, who basically had a similar condition. This is our first real look at the environments, and I gotta say, they are a huge step up from anything in the previous titles. The only game to even come close was AC5 and it's not even there. The way the locations are built reminds me a whole lot of Lost Planet 1 and 2, which is a nice surprise. Lots of mining equipment and industrial facilities. After AC sticks its landing, we get our name revealed to us, Enhanced Human C4621. And here we got a nice shot of a technically new, but it's an old mechanic. It's overboost. In this game, she's gonna be called Assault Booster. And speaking of returning mechanics, quick boosting is back. Not much to talk about here other than the giant moving mechs. It's interesting to note that we see the same AC having two different booster colors. So we either have booster color as a customizable option, or it's back to being tied to the booster part like in old gen. Hopefully it's gonna be tied to the booster part instead of just being a random aesthetic customization. Now we get some action shots, and I gotta say, these ACs look very grounded in comparison to other games. The most practicality we see in the entire trailer is this strange looking jump that is very reminiscent to the jump pads from Elden Ring, and it's weird to me that they will add them to this game when in any other Armored Core game you would just fly up instead of having to use this kind of thing. Here we get a demonstration of the back shields, and according to the interviews, they have a sort of instant block mechanic where the shield will be at its strongest during the first second or two of its deployment. Now we see some sort of scanning function, similar in nature to 5th Gen's scan mode, which allows you to see enemies through walls, but its implementation seems very different, so we'll have to wait and see on this one. Now this is new. Here we see the AC jumping into a hover mode. I'm quite interested in this because it may suggest that each leg type will have its own special function, as so far we've always seen quads being able to do this. Surely everyone is happy that the floating quads from 5th Gen are back. And speaking of new things we haven't seen before, here we see the AC firing its right-hand Gatling gun alongside its right-back missile launcher, which is something that has never been possible before in any of the games. Now we move on to a much quicker AC, and thank god we see the return of quick turning. This AC also fires some sort of energy shotgun, which is very similar to the 5th Gen pulse guns, which makes me very happy. And speaking of 5th Gen, immediately after we see the AC engages Assault Booster into a kick. Rejoice 5th Gen bros, the kick mechanic is back. Immediately after, we see a tank possibly kicking into a group of enemies and drifting around a corner. But more importantly, blink and you miss it, but we can see a very quick weapon swap. They significantly sped up the weapon swap animations compared to any of the other games. And then, to everyone's surprise, we see a flamethrower, another classic weapon that has been missing in action for the past 4 games. And of course we got giant sandworms, because half of this game's plot reads like a Dune ripoff. And here we get our first real look at the assault armor mechanic in action. Seems like the activation will carry momentum during startup, and we clearly see the AC take what seems to be a sniper rifle shot straight to the face without even flinching, so this maneuver may have some form of hyper armor. In response, the quad-legged AC deploys its shield and the biped activates its own assault armor in retaliation. We do not see how this interaction resolves. In FA, the interaction will result in both assault armors going off regardless of which activates first, and I'm curious to see if the shield is enough to block the explosion. We transition to a different scene and we see our AC holding what looks like a bazooka. Nice to see them back. But more importantly, we get a pretty good look at a very skinny reverse tune AC that comes with our character. He seems to be holding a handgun along with a missile launcher and a rifle on its back, alongside a laser blade on its left arm that has a twin blade, the same model that our AC is seen using later. We proceed to get combat shots of the ACs fighting multiple bosses. This part of the trailer is probably the most representative of what the game is actually gonna feel like when playing it, compared to everything else shown in the trailer.
借り物の翼でどこまで飛べるか。
And finally, we got our official release date, this 25th of August. Technically, it's the 24th for us in the West. Now that we got the trailer out of the way, let's check out some details from the interviews, because there's quite a bit to talk about in that front. First of all, the Assault Boost, which will be our new gap closer move, it all seems to indicate that it will operate like an overboost in the previous games, but I have the feeling that this time it will be a homing dash for some reason. But again, this is just a hunch on my part. Now the thing that will make or break the game, good old stagger. A stunner stagger has always been in these games in some form or another, but this time they seem to be committing way more into it, borrowing tidbits from the posture mechanics of Sekiro. Basically, every weapon will inflict some amount of impact force that will contribute towards depleting the stun bar of the enemies, and once the stronghold is overwhelmed, the enemy will be opened up and rendered unable to perform actions for a few seconds. On top of that, any attack performed during a stagger state on an enemy will be considered a direct attack, and it will deal increased damage, and in case of other enemies, they will straight up die on the spot. I am cautiously optimistic regarding this approach, because games that focus too much on stagger tend to be a bit frustrating to play. Just look at GVO 2. But it could also bring a few positive changes, like input forms actually mattering now instead of only being relevant for a few handful of weapons like in the previous games. We'll have to wait and see on this one. Now regarding the movement speed of the game, it has been said to be, and I quote, somewhere between AC3 and AC5, and combat can often reach the decent heights of AC4. As per usual, in terms of customization, our ACs will have 4 slots for holding weaponry, 1 on each arm, 2 on the back, but it also seems like our core would be able to equip some sort of support equipment, namely stuff like the assault armor we saw in the trailer. Also regarding weaponry is the fact that melee weapons seem to be now exclusive to the left arm, like they were in the earliest iterations of the series. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. I'm personally more of a gunner, so I'm fine with melee being very niche and a secondary thing. On the content side of things, we got an official return of the arena. This time it will be a BR simulator like it was in AC4 and Last Raven. And speaking of Last Raven, AC6 will feature multiple endings like it and Effect. This time it seems to be more in the for answer fashion, where the game won't open up new paths until you've cleared the game and you're playing in New Game Plus. And to wrap things up, the pre-orders for the premium and collector's editions of the game have been opened, and they feature quite a bit amount of goodies, including an art book, a steel case, a sticker sheet of the many logos and emblems featured in the game, the official digital soundtrack, a figurine of the main protagonist AC, pin badges, and exclusive to the premium edition, a garage for your AC figurine. Now on the Steam front, if you pre-order now, you will receive the following items: the Melander C3 part set early unlock, an emblem as an early unlock, and exclusive AC decal, on top of a special customization named Tenderfoot, whatever that means, it's probably a color scheme. And included with the digital deluxe edition comes the soundtrack and a digital art book. Overall, it's a pretty sizable amount of information. However, I can't shake the feeling that this trailer didn't do the gameplay justice at all, and if anything, it made it look worse than it actually is. The ACs felt like they were floating on wires all the time, and a lot of it felt a bit clunky to me. It will probably look fine during actual gameplay, but I will personally have liked to see actual gameplay footage instead of these curated money shots that barely tell anything. That's all I have for you today. See ya!